Welcome to the Cal Fire Show. I am Dr. Kelly Barron, and today we have a really cool episode. We have Leslie Draffin on, and she's got something really exciting to talk about. I think it's really exciting. Leslie is a trauma-informed somatic guide, a certified psychedelic microdosing practitioner, breathwork and mediation teacher, podcast host, and menstrual cycle educator. And that is a lot of credentials, Leslie. So welcome. I know everybody is excited to hear what it is that you will be talking about today. I'm sure it's something, at least in my age group, in this midlife area, we probably aren't as well educated about it and are very curious. So I'm so glad to have you on today. And tell us a little about yourself and anything that I missed in your bio.
Well, you got it pretty spot on. Thanks for having me on the show. So, like you said, my name is Leslie, and I help women regulate emotions, rewire their nervous system, and navigate life changes. Most of the women I work with are ages 30 to 65, and I really came to this work from my own healing, from my own deep sexual shame and religious trauma and disconnection from my own body, negative coping mechanisms like eating disorders, Adderall abuse, alcohol abuse. And, for me, I was a TV news anchor for 15 years. I was so wrapped up in that identity and secretly struggling so much with, what it was to be a news anchor, who I really was in this world, my purpose. I've been someone who's had anxiety since I could remember, and microdosing magic mushrooms paired with somatic practices and really understanding my menstrual cycle, I think were the trifecta that helped me move from abusing drugs and into this place of sobriety and into this place of really living from an embodied sense. And that was a big deal for me because I was not cool with my body. I didn't want to be in the body. The body was scary to me. Probably since I was a little girl, but certainly since I was 18, because at 18, I was diagnosed with herpes, and that just threw me into even more of a shame spiral. So that's sort of where I came from, and I've been in this work for going on about 4 to 5 years of helping women, kind of like myself.
I think that's awesome. I think there are so many women out there, so many women out there, so many that I've already talked to, myself included, where we have all this bottled up, whether it's trauma or shame or just not even knowing who we truly are because we're serving so many other people, that this is so needed, this conversation. And to have something so we're not turning to alcohol or we're not turning to drugs to try to cope and hide. I'm really excited to get into this with you. So my first question for you is, how do you see microdosing psilocybin? I said it right.
Almost, yeah, you almost did. Psilocybin. Personally, I wish it was called psilocybin because that's fascinating. That's a fabulous name.
All right, I almost got it. Intersecting with hormonal shifts and women that are, with the hormonal shifts that women are experiencing during perimenopause, menopause, this age range. And really, we're constantly going through hormonal shifts since we're born as women. I think we spend 87% of our lifetime changing. So how do you see this intersecting with that?
Yeah. So there isn't a lot of science to back this up. That's kind of my precursor disclaimer to all of this. Science is slowly catching up, but what we already know about science is they hate studying women who bleed. They'll study people who don't bleed anymore, but the second that you throw in a menstrual cycle, we just become too complicated. But what I have seen in my work and in some work of my mentors is that the way that life changes bring on hormonal changes, specifically the decrease of progesterone and estrogen over time in midlife. I think it really coincides well with psilocybin because of the way psilocybin interacts with serotonin in the body. So as serotonin receptors in the body change due to estrogen and progesterone slowly decreasing, I have seen psilocybin really do wonders to boost mood, help with brain fog, and help us really start to unpack and peel back the layers of societal conditioning, past traumas, past wounds, whatever you want to call it, right? Some people don't like to call it trauma. I know people don't want to go digging around in their trauma. Microdosing will help you with that if you want it to help you with that, or if it feels like it needs to help you with that. But that's sort of what I'll say, on the surface level. Now, on the spiritual level, because I am a witch, I really think, yeah, I really think that mushrooms are so potent for women in this time of our life, because as we transition into this new phase, we have to go through a death. We have to go through a death to old self, a death to previous versions of ourselves. And because microdosing these fungi medicines, which come from decay, really helps, I think, us to leave that old version behind, and with positive change. That's why I like to work with somatic healing practices like breathwork and meditation and movement. With those positive elements added into your tiny doses, I think you're really able to build a body-mind connection that's a lot stronger. You're able to start seeing into parts of your subconscious that, might have been holding you back. And for me, I've seen it almost turn me into like a game maker from Hunger Games, where I'm like looking down at my life and being able to like very consciously manipulate the things that I am doing and see what I'm doing and put the dots together. It's like it zooms you out so you can see like all the funny little like patterns that are keeping you stuck. And because I think mushrooms are such a gentle, when we're doing it with tiny doses, such a gentle ally, it can come from a place of a lot of compassion, a lot of love, and a lot of curiosity too, in a phase of life that can feel kind of the opposite in a lot of ways.
I've heard that I've heard from folks that have done it either on a microdosing level or a little bit bigger level, that it does, especially if you're stuck and you are holding yourself back and you don't necessarily know why. And yes, it could come from a place of trauma or something you just locked up. That it does do that, that it opens up, it takes away those blocks that you have up, lowers the walls, and lets you look at the path that probably is, and I would assume it's probably the one you want to take, you're just too afraid to take, or there's blockers there, but it helps open up and show you a path of what it could really look like, or like you said, connecting the dots and showing you the big picture without all the fear and society's expectations of your choices and this and that. So when I heard that, I was fascinated, and I personally was like, I want to do this because I want to, because there are things that are stuck in my life, and I'd love to open that up and be able to look at them.
Well, and I think on that really quickly, one of the reasons why that is absolutely true is because of how it works in the brain. And so the way that psilocybin works in your brain is that it impacts the part of the brain which is known as your default mode network. That's a high-level processing center that's like kind of the autopilot of your life. It's where your deeply ingrained beliefs and habits live, but it's also the thing that like gets you to the grocery store without you really having to consciously like process the route. Like if you've ever like come to at the parking lot, you're like, how did I get here? I was kind of just like zoned out. So that's you living from default mode. And it's a really excellent part of the brain because we don't want to have to give brain power to a route we know by heart, like going to the grocery store. Right. The problem is if the route that you know by heart is self-hate, negative self-talk, addiction, coping mechanisms that don't feel aligned anymore, but you're running that program over and over again, that's where life can feel stuck. And so psilocybin quiets that part of the brain, helps to turn on other parts of the brain. And I see it kind of as like thawing the lake that is the mind that can become really rigid over time. As psilocybin thaws and softens the default mode network, we're able to create new pathways between new habits. And that's sort of one of the reasons why what you're saying and that you've heard from other folks is absolutely true.
I love how you put that. It's already, I mean, I come from an alternative healthcare background, so it's not surprising that this interests me so much, but I'm wondering like why it took me so long to even learn about it and what a positive experience, because when you're growing up, so like maybe this is one of the things stuck in my brain. I grew up with an Irish Catholic cop as a dad, went to Catholic school. So I'm always like, oh, mushrooms can't be good. Like, I have nothing against him, but I'm like, maybe I shouldn't do that. So it's nice to put it in a perspective when you're talking very scientifically, like here are the things, and also, psychosocial too, as well. So getting back into the realm of women and where we are right now in our lifetime, especially in that 35, more like 40 to 60-year-old age range, where we're getting these mood swings. We don't know where they're coming from, just like we're PMSing, but on steroids at this point. That's probably not a good analogy. And then,
accurate analogy.
Very accurate. And also low libido, which happens to be a really big thing. And I know there's so many factors that go into it, but a majority of the low libido issues do come from inside this guy versus any kind of true medical issue. So how might microdosing help things like that, like your mood and your libido?
Yep. So we'll talk about them separately because I do think they're sort of separate. We'll go with mood first. So the way I see microdosing helping mood is it starts to extend the milliseconds between your trigger and your reaction. So often our moods happen, our mood swings can happen because we get triggered. We're probably already overstimulated or in a survival mode of something like fight, flight, this sympathetic nervous system activation. And you just lash out and react, right? And that can happen because of how sensitive our nervous system becomes in midlife as estrogen and progesterone shift. Those also impact your nervous system's capacity for feeling safe and feeling regulated. So when those kind of go bye-bye, nervous system activation and states of survival are things we get stuck in. So the reaction time between your trigger and how you're responding is real short. So with psilocybin, and when we pair it with intentional things like meditating or grounding or just laying outside and like letting the sun be on you or creativity or play, over time what I see happening is it extends the time between the trigger and the response. And so you have a moment to breathe and think, okay, and all this is happening so quickly, but what I've seen it do is it kind of says, okay, what's happening right now? How am I going to respond? I know I would usually respond in anger, but now I'm going to respond in curiosity. Like, why is this coming up for me? Why, and so it just extends the time between the trigger and your response. And for me, oh my God, that has been so helpful because while mood swings were a major thing I dealt with when I came off of hormonal birth control in 2020, what I also saw it really impacting was how I reached for alcohol, because I was reaching for alcohol to numb. And so I credit microdosing with helping me get sober because it extended the response, extended the time between trigger and response. And so when I'd get triggered with my emotions beforehand, I'm like, oh, I need a drink. And I would like take a shot or drink a glass of wine. Now I'm able to pull back, say, okay, why are we feeling triggered? Where is the trigger in the body? What's the story around the trigger? How could I just take 2 breaths and let this kind of like play out in a different, compassionate way? And so that's another reason why I think it helps with mood swings as well. You're going to mess up, right? Like when you first start microdosing, it's not going to be an instant thing. Microdosing takes time. It's like layered by layered healing on these tiny doses that sort of, kind of like layering on healing is a good way to put it.
Yeah, I like that.
Or we could we can think of it like if you have a clog in your drain. If you pour hot water down the drain, maybe it'll get the clog out. Okay, maybe. If you pour Drano down the drain, yeah, it'll get the clog out maybe as well, but it might take a little bit longer. If you put a snake down the drain and like really out there and get the thing out, it's going to pull the clog out. That's the look, and that equation is supposed to, or that analogy is supposed to be for microdosing and big dose journeys. Microdosing is little by little getting the Drano, getting the hot water, letting it work its way out. Full dose journey will blow that out of the water. It might be a little bit more traumatic, might be a little bit more difficult, but again, it can clear things. And so I guess I just pointed that out because I have found that all of those extended spaces between trigger and response are really helpful for people with mood swings. Now, let's talk about pleasure and libido, because that was my other major issue when I quit hormonal birth control and when I really started to dive into my own sexual trauma and my own sexual shame. The way that I see microdosing helping with libido is first that it helps you reconnect to your sensual nature. And sensual and sexual, not the same thing, right? So I'm not talking about sex at this point. I'm not even saying like we should be thinking about orgasm at this point. Like we said before about the default mode, if you can soften that space and then create new pathways to pleasure through sensual connection, that will over time get strengthened. When you add psilocybin on top of it, it just helps rewire the brain to say, okay, when this happens, this is going to happen now, versus when this happens, that was going to happen. So you can start to sort of like, I don't want to say trick, but you can fake it till you make it when it comes to these practices, so that you really start to rewire your brain and your body for sensuality. The most potent thing I would add with that is a scent. So I have like programmed my brain. There's a special massage oil that I get from Australia. And like when I smell that, now it just instantly can put me into like my pleasure, because what I was doing for probably a year was microdosing and giving myself a breast massage, or microdosing and giving myself a womb massage with that special oil that had a very specific scent. I wasn't masturbating, I wasn't self-pleasuring, but I was connecting the dots between, okay, when I come into this space, the lights are low, the candles are lit, I have this special scent. It rewired my brain with the scent and with the mushrooms to relax into safety of the body and to start putting together this new pattern that has, for me, really formed a lovely new connection in the brain between my self-pleasure, my sensuality, and my body.
I tell women all the time, you take orgasm off the table. Mm-hmm. Take expectations, time limits, everything off the table and set the stage. Exactly how you're saying. Set the stage that makes you feel sensual. Mm-hmm. And it's still very hard for women to do it. They can do all the right things, but like what you're adding is get to that last piece, be able to fully drop into it. Mm-hmm.
One other thing I do want to add too about the sensual is, well, first of all, anyone with a little bit of religious trauma or a little bit of religious programming, mm-hmm. like sensual is just like the most sinful word. Add into that a good dose of diet culture, and food is like such an enemy. I've had eating disorders for 20 plus years, and a sensual act I'm obsessed with now is like slowly eating fruit, or slowly and being able to fully taste, smell, lick, chew, like letting it be a sensual practice instead of, something that feels wrong or feels like that I just rush through. Another practice that I love is what I call the 5 senses practice. And it's really just finding something to excite your brain. Like I have this lovely bouquet of flowers from my garden. Something to excite the smell, something to excite like your hearing, your touch, right? And you can do that with partnered play. Like you could do, feeding each other a certain food, or playing music, or, using scent like we talked about, or using touch. Those are all ways that we are forcing ourselves to be present. Because I think what's really an overarching theme in the conversation today is finding the ability to become more present. That helps with mood swings because you're pausing, and it'll help you go from a state of thinking you've got no libido, thinking you've got no desire, thinking you could just take it or leave it, to little by little noticing what does feel good. And then hopefully over time, when you figure out all the fun things that feel good to you in all of the areas of life, like the sun on your face, a dewy grass on your feet, like the way that these flowers feel, the way that they smell, over time, hopefully then you can pair that with practices that are more geared towards sex, more geared towards sexual pleasure.
That I so agree with you. And I think that that's one of the big things too, is women understanding to take the time and invest in themselves, to set the stage, no expectations. And then, if you can bring in another element, like, I'm not even going to say it, magic mushrooms. I'm always going to call it magic mushrooms now. If you could bring that in as an aid to help, and I firmly believe in rewiring the brain. And if that can just help you speed it up or just help you to open up more. Why aren't we doing that?
Yeah.
Would be my big question. You have a course because you are a menstrual cycle educator, and throughout perimenopause and menopause, as you know, it's here, it's not here. We're like on the path to the 12 months now. We're back down to it, and it's all over the place. But you have a course called Awakening Your Feminine Flow, where you tie microdosing into the menstrual cycles. And how does this approach adapt for women whose cycles are, so we're in this phase where they all of a sudden they're absent or they're irregular? And what somatic practices play into this with this guidance for women's health?
So I created Awaken Your Feminine Flow probably about 1.5 years ago, and it's based on the cyclical microdosing method that I created, which is a microdosing protocol based around female hormones. The gist of it is that in the first half of your cycle, when things are going really well, you would microdose two to 3 times a week. And then in the second half of your cycle, when the challenges come up, you'd microdose as many as 5 times a week. And so for folks who have a regular cycle, that's fairly easy to follow. For women who are in perimenopause or women who no longer bleed, what I always recommend is you take the cycle out of it and you work with the moon. And so, yes. I know. So right now we're about to be in a full moon as we're recording this. And so that would be very much your peak, your inner summer. And so at this point, think of it like ovulation. You are magnetic. Maybe you're a little horny. Maybe your emotions are very heightened. So at this point, you're still microdosing only a few times a week, 2 to 3 times a week. As the moon goes from brightness down into darkness, right? As we wane, we would really start to look in. We would be shifting towards our inward yin energy. And that's when I like to microdose more often. So in the second half of the moon cycle, you're microdosing up to 5 days a week. Then when the new moon happens again, that's very much like your bleed, your most inward time. And then as the moon goes back to brightness, you would shift into dosing just twice a week. Why does this work? I think it backloads the microdosing into the phases of the moon that are very inward and very shadowy, right? And so for me as a witch, that's like one of those things where that's very much a time I'm turning into myself. I'm looking at my patterns. I'm looking at the way I'm interacting in the world. And I'm really naturally gravitating towards things like meditation, things towards journaling, things towards like, moon gazing itself. In the other half, or I guess we could say the first half of the moon's phases, as the moon goes from new to full, that's a very outward energy, right? That's a look at me energy. That's what can I be out doing, helping others, giving to others, sharing my light with the world, right? And so in that phase, 2 microdoses a week is enough to support you mood wise, but it also is enough to give you like a lot of the afterglow days. Because what we should talk about too is that when you're microdosing, you're taking a tiny amount of magic mushrooms. So small, you're not high, you're not hallucinating. A real common word folks throw around is sub-perceptual, but I believe somatically you can perceive the shift if you're really present. So I don't like to say sub-perceptual, I say non-intoxicating. So you can go about your everyday life. Once you figure out your dose, you can work, you can drive, you can parent, you can do any of the things you want to do. And so those dose days are only a few times a week, and then you're only doing this for a few weeks at a time. So with this situation where we're talking about cycling with the moon, dosing with the moon's phases, I would say devote 3 months to this and then take a month off. And in the days when you are not ingesting mushrooms, look for the benefits that you see also on dose days. What is your mood like? Are you more present? How long do you feel you can pause between getting triggered and responding? Are you still reacting? If you are, just be curious and compassionate. This is not about judging yourself. This is not about feeling like you're going to change like that. It took me well over a year of intentional work with microdosing and then a big period off of microdosing to finally integrate a lot of the teachings that I was looking for. I started dosing in early 2022. The intention I asked for was to be open to receiving pleasure. I didn't get that intention for well over a year. And so this is a long game, right? It's a long game, but it's also not like a pharmaceutical drug. You don't take it to like help a symptom. You're taking this into the body as a sacrament, as like an ally, as a relationship that really I see as being one that's very mystical, very supportive, and really beneficial to you over time. But again, this isn't something that you do for the rest of your life. I have not microdosed in over a year, and I still have all of the benefits. Yep. Yeah.
That I'm so glad you said that, because I'm sure everybody's thinking, well, if I start, does that mean I have to do it forever?
No.
And
Nope.
wow.
I had a couple of incredibly potent 3-month experiences where I dosed several times a week. I was working with a guide, and then I was in training when I did it, and I got sober. I've been sober since December 26th of 2022.
Wow.
And I have not regularly dosed since, gosh, we're in August of 25. I haven't regularly dosed since like late 23. Yeah. And here and there, we can talk about that too if you want, of how I think I wouldn't say it's recreational at all, but like intentional fun can happen with microdosing too. It doesn't always have to be about like digging through your trauma. But yeah, I haven't sat with them in a steady protocol for a really long time, but yet I'm still more connected to my body, more connected to myself. And I think that is really also because of how much I dedicate to somatic practices, which is another part of your question.
Right.
So somatic practices for me look like body scanning, looking for sensation, and remembering that sensation is the birthplace of your thoughts, feelings, and beliefs. We think it's the other way around.
Right.
We think the thoughts and feelings are from our head, but in actuality, 80-ish% of the things that we believe, think, feel start in the body. And so microdosing really helped me start to see my body as a very intelligent being, not some unsafe place, not some place of shame. And so now what I do daily is tap into the body's sensations, look for anything that's peeking its little head out and wants to be seen. Often it's tension or pain or tightness. That's like, they're loud. So you often hear those first. Right. And then getting really curious about what that's trying to tell me. And so for me, even though I haven't microdosed in a really long time, last year, my dog died. My soulmate dog died. And I knew microdosing was not going to be something I wanted to rely on because I was in such a big state of grief. But somatics came in to help me feel the sensations of grief, move through the sensations of grief, and instead of reaching for booze, which I would have done 2 years prior, really sit with those feelings.
Well, so this brings up a really good question, and you've sort of already gone through that. For women dealing with subconscious fears or trauma that may surface, especially in this time period where your hormones are just, they're out of whack. I don't even like the word imbalance because there's no such thing as balanced hormones in a female. They're always doing their thing. Yeah. But they're amplified, or the decrease in them amplifies other parts of your body. How does intentional microdosing support this emotional healing and self-connection?
I think with the right, first of all, I think in this phase of life, it's really important to work with a guide. If what you're talking about is present, if you've got some fear, if you have been coming up against things like, what's my purpose now? What is life even now? Is this it? Right? All of those like existential crisis type of questions are really something that I would recommend you work with a person to assist you with, because you can't hold your own subconscious very well on your own at first. I don't believe, right? You always kind of want someone to walk there with you. You can also do it alone. Like, I'm not saying you have to hire somebody. But what I would say about this is I see microdosing as an ally that helps to open the door into your subconscious and then holds your hand while you walk through. The way that I work is that when I have a client, they will eat a microdose, they will come to our Zoom call, and usually what we will do is we'll do some type of a visualization, either a body scan visualization where we're looking for sensations in the body, or if they're a visual person, I'm a very visual person when it comes to meditation, looking through sort of the third eye space at what's coming forward. A lot of times that's fear. A lot of times that can be, fear from past experiences or fear of the unknown and moving forward, right? The fear of the future. So what I've found that microdosing does is it helps to create I guess, a sense of calm and a sense of safety in the body, a felt sense of that. And when you are doing this intentionally, it almost can act like an anchor through the fears, if that makes sense. It's kind of hard to explain, but it's like it's microdosing has this way of anchoring your safety in the body and allowing you to have this deeply felt sense of trust so that when those come up, because they will, right? And you're not going to stop those. When those come up, instead of spiraling, you have an anchor in the self that feels like home. And also through somatic practices like breathwork, like movement, like grounding, like certain meditative practices, you can move the emotions out. And so, for instance, one thing that comes up a lot for folks is anxiety and panic, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big one that I have people spiraling with in the midlife time frame, right? Hot flashes paired with panic, a horrible combination, right? And so what I have noticed is that when we're starting to microdose and we're pairing it with somatic practices like cooling breath work, like taking a cold shower, like grounding on the earth, like a protection practice, right? Instead of you thinking that and living here, right? Thinking this is always going to be the way it is. Oh my gosh, worst case scenario, ruminating thoughts, death. Instead, through the presence of breath, through the new connection you're making and you're reinforcing through microdosing, hopefully when those things come up in the future, you have this toolbox of practices and the safety in the body that can bring you back out of it a little bit quicker.
Talked about a little earlier, we didn't actually say the word cortisol, but fight or flight and the stress, and cortisol is such a big player in everybody's life, especially though during this time. And you talked about alcohol and stress, and if there's anything that I can impress upon anyone, we'll start with cortisol. Get that cortisol level down. So if this is a perfect scenario for that, learning to not be in this state of fight or flight anxiety, allowing the world to control your emotions and being more receptive and calm. And like you said, being able to take that split second to not react like this and lash out or grab a drink and to be able to be like, okay, it's okay. And look at it like that. I think that's a tremendous tool in supporting self-care and your health. And then also to not turn to alcohol because it's very easy. It's right there. You can go anywhere and get it. And it helps numb the pain, but to have a better outlet for that, a natural outlet for that. So we're not doing that because in this phase, alcohol does not play well with women.
Right.
Not saying don't drink alcohol. I'm saying understand it will not play as nicely as it did. It's a little bit more detrimental at this point in everything that you do. I went totally off topic, but I kept thinking, and I'm like, she's talking about cortisol. Like this is huge.
Right.
And it's so underserved. Like everybody looks at where your estrogen levels and your progesterone and your testosterone, and they mention cortisol, but they don't really tell you other than you need to get 8 hours of sleep and do yoga to deal with it. I think this is a very fascinating route to, like I'm sure you tell everyone, do your research, only pick what you think is right for you.
Right.
I know we were going to talk about as well that every path, like in life, every medication or every therapy or treatment is not always the right fit for every person. Right. Some people, it carries risks. If you want to like jump in a little bit on that. Yeah. I know you probably tell all your clients, that right up front.
Absolutely. So first of all, I love that you mentioned cortisol. I've written it down because I'm sure I'm going to birth a masterclass on this because actually you're 100% right. This is exactly what that is. So let's talk about risks. Psilocybin is incredibly safe, incredibly safe. There has been one known death that was linked to someone who had a heart attack from a large dose decades ago in a study. And they may have already had some type of a heart issue as an older man. Okay. Yeah. Paired that with alcohol. I mean, you can't even compare them, right? So it's incredibly safe. And yet there are people I would caution against diving in solo Would I say it's not for you? Not necessarily, but I don't recommend you just go buy some mushrooms that you get from like Fungi 29, who's going to comment on this podcast. That's a red flag. Don't buy drugs from people on the internet that you don't know. But so I wouldn't recommend people who have a history of schizophrenia in the family or have had a history personally of schizophrenia or bipolar to just go and eat some mushrooms. There are some studies, and there's actually a clinical trial going on right now looking at bipolar and psychedelics. So I think we're going to have more, insight on that soon. I wouldn't say that it's a never for these folks, but because of the way that psilocybin, especially at the higher dose levels, which is really what these studies are often looking at, is an amplifier. If you're already in a state of something like mania, it can push you into spiritual emergency. And I think that's what happened back in like the 50s, 60s with a lot of these horror stories of people being hospitalized and like never coming out of the insane asylum. And a lot of that fear marketing that happened. There were probably some people who were experiencing some type of schizophrenia or psychosis that then ingested some type of a drug, maybe LSD, acid, maybe psilocybin, and then were pushed into a spiritual state of emergency that then led to this crisis, right? And I'm not saying that that's going to happen to you, but I'm just saying that is a word of caution. The other thing is that there are some medications, and they're constantly changing the directives on these, but there are some medications that are potential contraindications for psilocybin. Heart medicine and blood pressure are really ones you want to look at. If your blood pressure is manageable and it's under control, then I think you'd be safe. If it's something that's not under control, you're going to want to pay attention, and you're going to possibly want to talk to your doctor about this and know that your doctor may be well-versed and be open to it, and maybe not. Lastly, what I'll say is that this is not addictive, like not addictive. However, the way that our human brains work is that we think that when we experience something excellent, the only reason why we're experiencing that excellent thing is because of this thing that happened first. So people get a psychological dependency on psilocybin. And I've seen this not only on a microdose, but I've seen this for people who just like skip from one big dose journey to another big dose journey to an ayahuasca journey to LSD and MDMA. Like it's a very present thing people don't want to talk about in this industry. And so that's why you have to take breaks. That's why I recommend that you never dose more than 5 times a week, and you don't ever dose for longer than 3 months at a time. You've got to take a break. You have to build in breaks in your week and build in breaks over your year. And that's because you don't have to rely on these medicines for your whole life. You don't have to rely on these medicines every single day to still experience the joy and the bliss and the elevated mood and the regulated emotions. And you're not going to know that for sure unless you do take those breaks. And so that's the big risk. Like I mentioned, I don't really talk about where to get these things. I have some of that guidance in my free guide, but like whenever I'm on podcasts and then these are shared on socials, there's always like a bot out there that's like, it's always fun guy and a number. Like there's just like a bot out there that's always like, buy your shrooms from Fun Guy 89. I'm like, we're not doing that. That's a red flag. But if you're worried about this, if you're worried about it, and you're worried about the risk associated with it legally, unfortunately, there are a magnitude of different laws in the states. And I don't know where you live, but you're going to want to look those up for yourself. Some places it's decriminalized, some places it's illegal, some places it's legal. And those are 3 different things, very different things. So you're going to want to look to see what it is in your local area. And then also know that there are reputable people and companies operating out there that you can connect with. You might find them in your local farmer's market. You might find them at your local psychedelic society. And I say local because most states now have some type of a free psychedelic society membership that you can join. They might have meetups. We have some here in Texas. I know there's some in South Carolina. There's obviously huge ones in like New York City. And then what I would also say is that if you're listening to this podcast and you're wondering if this is for you, it's probably a sign that it could be for you just because you've listened this far. Like
Right. Oh, is it like
truthfully.
that little space in your head, right? That we need to drop the wall. It's the one that's like waving, like I'm
Yeah.
so want to do this.
Yeah. And so for me, you talked earlier about your own upbringing, with your dad and having gone to Catholic school. The first thing I had to do, I was still a news anchor. I was a public figure when I started secretly microdosing for my own mental health. And I had to do a lot of work around the taboo that this was bad and I was going to lose my mind. I was a dare kid, right? Like I love to say I won a t-shirt decorating contest in 3rd grade for dare. I would pay so much money to have that shirt somewhere because look at me now. But it's, it's just, I had to do a lot of deprogramming around that belief. And for me, the pandemic shined a light on a lot of things that proved to me that this is not illegal because we have a loving government that cares that we might hurt ourselves. This is illegal because when you begin to commune with this sacred medicine, you become ungovernable. Like you question everything. You start to understand that maybe it's not that we should be fighting these people or we should be against these people. It's very much that we're all connected out of love. And that's terrifying to a government that wants to control their people. Right. And so for me, after the pandemic, when I saw all the different states and even with the legalization of marijuana, it's like, why can this person who lives across the street but technically is in another state do it legally, but I can't? Aren't we both humans? So I just share that because it is an internal kind of reckoning that you have to come to. Is the risk worth the reward? It was for me. And there are certainly places you can go to do this safely. Colorado is one of them. And that's sort of where I've gone. So it's just like, yes, there are risks. There are things to take into consideration. And at least from my perspective in my own life, it was highly worth any of those potential risks to get to this side of things.
So you brought up marijuana. So I'm sure some folks are like curious. What's the difference? Why don't I just do this versus that? Marijuana versus shrooms.
Yeah. So I am not super well versed in cannabis. That's not my thing. I do like CBD. It really helps with my anxiety. But from what I've noticed, the big difference is that cannabis is not a psychoactive drug. I don't believe cannabis is really working to help with the brain rewiring. From what I know, and again, I'm not an expert, is cannabis is more working on your pain receptors. It's more working on, helping you feel calm, unless you get like a bad strain and then you're super anxious. At least that was my experience. That was college though. That was like swag weed, dirt weed. So that's kind of what I understand. And I think that that's maybe one of the reasons why we've seen marijuana become legalized, because cancer patients, because people with chronic pain have experienced so much benefits. And we also know that the veteran population is using cannabis, but we also know the veteran population, and they're very much like the leading edge for some of this research, especially here in Texas. The veterans, my husband's a veteran, they're eating mushrooms. They're eating psychedelics, they're drinking psychedelics, and they're studying how it's impacting their PTSD. If we can get them to continue to look at this, like them as in the government, to continue looking at how veterans are impacted, my hope is that we will see this kind of shift. We thought we were going to get a really big, check with the approval for MDMA last year. It didn't happen. The study had some problems, and it was a huge setback because they thought MDMA was going to get approved for MDA approved treatments, right? Like therapeutic treatments with MDMA. It didn't get the seal of approval. That really hurt a lot of other things because we thought psilocybin would be next. I'm thinking it might be 5 to 10 more years, unfortunately. But like I said, this is accessible if you know where to get it. If you want to work with it, ask the universe, ask God to put it in your life. And I wholeheartedly believe it will happen. It's wild to me how underground this is, but how people will be doing this and you just don't really know. Your friends could be doing it, but not talking to you about it. And so the conversation, just conversing about it could open some doors too.
I have a very naive question to ask.
Sure.
So if you're microdosing, how are you eating it? Are you drinking? How are you making a tea out of it? Or is there a million ways to do it?
So the two ways that are most common is in a capsule. So dried fungi crushed up in a capsule that you would just ingest.
Never would have
Or
thought. Never
no,
would have
never.
thought. I'm thinking
Okay.
of like, okay, we got to jam these into a peanut butter sandwich and we got to eat it.
That's hysterical. And that's also very like very 60s
College.
of you. I know. I was like, it sounds like maybe you've done that before. So, um, eating dried fungi in a capsule, grinding it up and putting into a tea, those are really the main ways. And the reason capsules are so popular for microdoses is because it's very easy to like measure them out and know how much you're ingesting. And that's a really key thing, right? We want to always start very small, tiny amounts. Some of the people that I work with start with just 50 milligrams or even 25 milligrams. Just to put that in perspective, a tripping dose is somewhere between 2 and 5 grams. So it's a teensy amount, right? And so it's easier to sort of control the amount that you're ingesting when it's in a capsule, but you also can pop the capsule open and put it in your tea. Someone I saw online was making a tincture, but I don't know much about that. Tinctures are more for other forms of psychedelics from what I've experienced. But yes, usually you're ingesting it either in a capsule or in some type of dried form that you could put in a tea as well.
Well, looking ahead in this world of microdosing, what do you think the emerging trends are? What are we going to start to see? What haven't we uncovered yet?
I think the big emerging trend that I have seen over the last year is moms doing it. Big time. I work with moms. There's a fabulous company out. Are they a company or an organization? I don't know which one they'd classify themselves as, but it's called Moms on Mushrooms. They're out of Colorado and they've been on like the Today Show. They're huge. But what we're seeing it do to help with patients raising little ones, like, oh my goddess, like we talked about, the extending of that trigger to response when you're raising little beings, like so beneficial. The other thing is that I really feel like this is helpful for postpartum depression.
I was just going to say that. Like, how this could combat so much of that.
Yep. And there is, my mentor, Michaela Delamico, did a survey. So it's not a study. It was a self-reported survey. And I believe her results are out. She worked with some of the other heavy hitters in the field. And they looked at people who had dosed, and I believe it was any dose. I don't think it was just microdoses, but dosing before conception, during pregnancy, breastfeeding, and postpartum. And the amount of people who were saying it was helping them was just astronomical. Right. And that's such a taboo. Like, seriously, what can you name a bigger taboo than like eating psychedelic mushrooms when you're pregnant or breastfeeding?
I mean,
crazy.
Such taboo. Alcohol, which is warranted. So I can only, and then we don't demonize alcohol, and I love beer. Yeah. So I'm not saying I don't like but we demonize like shrooms, and now even marijuana is becoming more mainstream, and we don't demonize alcohol.
I know, it's wild, and honestly, I think that's a frontier that we're going to see more people looking at. There's a company called Hystelica out of the UK, and they are currently doing a study themselves on microdosing in menopause.
Oh, I love this.
And so I know it's another self-reported study. And so I think that's going to be really interesting. As far as emerging trends and things moving forward, I think I don't know if I think this. What I think we need, I'll say that, is more women. We have to rematriate this. Out there on the interwebs, it's all the bros talking about how to biohack with these sacred medicines. And for me, that's like really bastardizing the entire thing. I think that this is a deeply feminine medicine. You know, the reason why we even know about psilocybin cubensis, which is the strain of mushrooms that we're working with here in the North American states, at least, is because of Maria Sabina, who is she was a mushroom priestess, I guess is what lots of folks say, but she was from Mexico. And her story was kind of without her full consent popularized in like the 1950s in Time magazine. And that's why we have mushrooms here, because of her work, right? And so I think we need a bigger push to bring more women in. I think we need a bigger push to make it sacred. And I think that in the current climate we're living in, where it is chaotic AF, when we can come back into a state of our own equilibrium, of our own harmony, especially as women, then we can impact everyone around us as we shine our light. And I think that's what I really hope we start to see even more so. It's certainly part of my mission and my like life's work is to just help awaken women so that they awaken those around them. And mushrooms are a huge tool in that.
So tell us where. I know everybody right now is like, well, they're Googling. They're Googling your name and they're trying to find out. So where is it best for people to follow you and in your website? And obviously, I also want to touch on, as soon as you give us that information, the importance of having a guide.
Sure. So my Instagram is at Leslie Draffin. I'm on TikTok, which is kind of where I'm like obsessed with these days, at the Womb Mystic. I love TikTok. I avoided TikTok forever and I'm obsessed with it.
Womb. Everybody at the Womb.
The Womb Mystic. Yep.
Mystic. You'll probably, everybody's going to jump on right now and be like,
perfect. Yes. And then I have a website, lesliedraffin.com. I also have my own podcast, The Light Within. And so that's where I would start. If you're listening this far and you are still very interested, I have a free guide, Activate Your Inner Magic. It's a 101 training really on how to start microdosing. It's all the questions you're too afraid to Google. And it will help set you up with some of the really basics for protocols, including like journaling prompts to really help you settle into like why you want to welcome these into your life. And that also will put you on my email list where like a lot of goodies happen. This is not a conversation we love to have on socials. I almost never talk about it on socials anymore. I talk about it here on podcasts and in my email list. So that would be what I would recommend. And I can give you that link for show notes.
Yeah, absolutely. Please do that because I'd love to be able to give it around. I'm sure, it's a great resource and it's a great spot to start, because if you're someone like me that has so limited knowledge, very little knowledge of the benefits, and like I was telling you before we started recording, that it would be very beneficial to just start with someone that's a guide to get you on your path safely, to help you feel supported and safe to start it out. And I was when you said working with a guide, when you're dosing, and I'm like, well, how are we doing that?
Yeah.
And you said Zoom, and I'm like, oh, okay, I got it.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you can go to I just got back from Denver, so I'm sure you could go to retreats and things like that and do it there. But I think that's really cool that you could do it on Zoom and sort of, why not?
Yeah, from anywhere you are. And I think for me, when I started my own work, I had DIY'd my healing for a really long time, picking and choosing a little bit of this, a little bit of that. I went the Western medical model with therapy and even medications. And so when mushrooms came into my life, I had a lot of that fear. And I knew I don't want to DIY this. I don't want to be poking around in the subconscious alone. And so for me, that was why it was really important for me to have a guide. And so that's, I think, a lot of the reason why women come to me is because they don't want to poke around on their own. But the other thing is, it's hard to see your own shadows. It's hard to see, your own subconscious. And so having someone there to walk with you as a guide can be really beneficial to sort of help you go even deeper. And then also my role is to hold the space, right? To hold space for you to feel safe enough to explore, which can be really tricky on your own. Believe me, I've done that solo as well. And it can be really tricky. The other thing I think is so helpful for having someone to work with, it's like validating the things you're experiencing. Because for me, one thing that can happen with this work is especially if you've never really worked with your intuition, you haven't really worked with your conscious/unconscious thoughts, you might start to second guess the things that you're experiencing. And I wholeheartedly believe that mushrooms will show you what you are needing to see. It won't necessarily be what you want to see.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
so because of that, having someone who is practiced in this, who can be there to hold the space for you, can be really helpful to just ground the experience and to make it a positive container. And I work with people one-on-one, and I also have a group membership for folks who, are either in one-on-one with me and they want additional support, or for those who might want to dip their toe in. It can be a nice container, nowhere near the support that you would get. Obviously with one-on-one, there's not really, really much one-on-one interaction. But that group is really also great for folks who want to start somatic healing. It's very focused on that. So it's more, I would say the inner circle is sort of more somatic healing focused. And I just know the women are also microdosing, and we talk about that too. But like this month, we're doing 30 days of somatic practices every day, like live every day. So that's in that group too.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing all that. And I want to thank you so much for coming on and talking. I could sit here and talk with you for hours about this. It's just fascinating. And again, coming from an alternative healthcare background, I fully support this if it's right for you. And do your research. I do wholeheartly endorse finding a guide. Obviously, we have a beautiful guide right here that you can contact Leslie. Last question. So I always ask every guest for a theme song, whether it's on their journey, whether it's something from the past, just whatever song they sort of attach to their life. And I put it on the Cal Fire playlist on Spotify. So what would that song be?
My song would be Back in My Body by Maggie Rogers.
That is going on the list.
Yeah.
Now everybody's going to microdose to that song.
It's a good one. It's got like a good dance beat. It's got like a really good hook, and it's such a quintessential like theme song for my life, because my body was a battleground for so long, a body filled with shame and disconnection, and microdosing paired with somatic practices brought me back home to my body. And from this place, I can live my fullest light.
This is the most eclectic playlist, but it all has that same, like, it resonates with someone, with the individual and like where they came from, and it holds a big meaning to it.
Nice.
But I want to thank you so much. It was so much fun. It's so informative. And everyone, please go find Leslie on the interwebs and check out her free guide. That's awesome that you do that for people. And if you love the episode, also check out her podcast. What was say your podcast name again so everybody remembers?
Yep. The Light Within.
The Light Within. That's probably going to be really good. It's going on the list right now. Well, thank you, everyone. And don't forget, you can catch us on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, YouTube, all the places. And have an awesome day.